I had a good call with Donald Trump last night again. We obviously talked about laying out the facts, talking about how the intense and effective connections between our two countries flow back and forth. We talked about some of the challenges that we can work on together. It was a good call.
A few moments later.
Justin Trudeau made his way down to meet with President-elect Donald Trump. He also was at a dinner table, you can see there, with Howard Lutnick, the incoming Secretary of Commerce, and his wife, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, incoming lead of the Interior Department, and his wife, and Mike Waltz, Trump's choice to be National Security Advisor, along with his wife. You can also see there the Senator-elect from Pennsylvania, Dave McCormick. Trudeau brought some of his cabinet as well to have this dinner, where they wanted to discuss the proposed tariffs Donald Trump has talked about with Canada and Mexico.
25% on Canadian and Mexican goods, 10% on all Chinese goods, 41% of total trade to the U.S. is from Mexico, China, and Canada. We're looking at a total of $3.1 trillion of goods.
That are imported totally.
That are imported totally. You know, this is a big deal because we don't export as much to them as they send
China
to us.
Specifically.
Yeah. And so this is a big deal. I mean, you know, Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump ideologically opposed, and yet you see Justin Trudeau. I'm going to read you this quote. You're going to see how conciliatory he is. He's not messing around. He understands he can't play games here. This will deeply affect Canada. And so this is a quote from him earlier on Friday. He says, ultimately, it's through lots of real constructive conversations with President Trump that I'm going to have that will keep us moving forward on the right track for all Canadians. It's important to understand that Donald Trump, when he makes statements like that, he plans on carrying them out. There is no question about it.
And it's not even clear what he's asking these countries to do. I mean, he says it's about fentanyl, but like no fentanyl comes over the border from Canada. You know, and even the fentanyl that does come over the border from Mexico is mostly brought over by American citizens. So it's not really clear what these countries could do to appease Trump. I really hope he is just saber rattling, because I agree, at least I think we agree, that a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods and all Mexican goods would be devastating, as would the likely retaliation, which would probably be much more surgically targeted to American businesses that would suffer, that are politically important.
Yeah, a couple of
incredibly busy here in the legislature right now as you figure out how to handle these tariffs.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here, and thanks for your interest, because 25% tariffs across the board with no exemptions, that's going to hurt every Canadian province. And so I think it's why you've seen that the premiers have taken such a vocal position on it so soon.
Well, what did you think when you heard this 25%? I mean, especially for oil and gas, I'd imagine that could be devastating to the Alberta economy.
Well, it's much higher than I expected him to lead with. I thought we were talking about a 10% tariff, which was going to be bad enough. I had hoped that we'd be able to make the case as well that energy should be exempted, because of course the Americans benefit from having 4 million barrels a day, most of that coming from Alberta, able to feed their needs. It brings down the cost of gasoline and diesel, which the Americans have said that they want to do. But I think we've got to take the new administration at its word, that there are some pressure points that they want us to resolve before we can even get to those discussions. They clearly do not like to see either Canada or Mexico use as a backdoor for China to be able to have goods come into the American market tariff-free and hollow out their manufacturing sector. They clearly are irritated that we've not met our 2% NATO commitment, and most recently they're irritated about the porous border for drugs, for people. And if we're going to have constructive conversations about trade, we've got to address those issues.
And when you said initially responding to this that there was valid concerns, that was a different tone than, say, Doug Ford, who said it's like being stabbed in the back by a family member. I take it, valid concerns doesn't necessarily mean you think that the 25% tariff is justified, though.
No, well, look, I mean, we have been raising the concern about the unsustainable levels of newcomers coming to Canada for some time. We had started off because we'd had declining population saying, oh, great, let's have more people come to Alberta. But we have had 450,000 people come to Alberta in the last 3 years. And a lot of that is because the federal government has really taken off all of the restrictions on newcomers coming into Canada. It's stressing all of our services. And now we're seeing that some people are using Canada as a staging area to sneak into the United States. The Americans have identified that. That's a problem. It's a problem for Canadians, and it's a problem for Americans.
Most of us who do business there realize it's time to really set the record straight here, because they cheat, they steal, they don't protect IP, we can't use their courts. And Xi is getting away with it because he thinks no one will stand up to it. My strategy here, and what I would advocate for, is to raise the walls so high that it forces him to the table here in Washington for a reciprocal deal, which we desperately need. It's not 25%, it's 400%. You basically threaten to bankrupt his economy. And the only reason Xi gets to be the supreme leader is people are employed. If you threaten the core of his economy by shutting down access to the world's largest economy,
people rise up.
They rise up, they throw him out. And when he senses that coming, he'll fly to Washington to cut a deal. It's going to take very tough negotiations, but I'm happy to see this is going on. Mexico and Canada, different deal. We have a new trade agreement. The challenge for Mexico has a brand new leader, so you see she's feisty, she's making her moves, that makes sense. Canada's a different situation. Trudeau's on his way out. He's at the end of a long mandate. In the parliamentary system, when you can't win a majority mandate, they throw you out. That's happening to him now. The new Prime Minister, most likely, is Pierre Poilievre.
We love him.
Well, he is going to be negotiating this deal. So I would advise Trump's team to bring him down to Mar-a-Lago and meet him now, because he's already told the Canadian people what he's going to do. Get rid of carbon taxes, lift the ban on pipelines, be pro-business. That's in sync with Trump's mandate. So I think there's going to be a great relationship in Canada, the U.S. over the next decade.
President Trump had been saying that he would do this. He was elected 3 weeks ago. You'd think the Prime Minister would have been furiously planning, preparing, meeting with the premiers and talking about a counter plan during that time. And now we learn that since the threat happened, he's come up with exactly one response: a Zoom call. He's going to hold a Zoom call tomorrow. Of course, the media is absolutely captivated by this development. There's going to be a Zoom call between 11 or 12 politicians, and somehow this is going to solve the problem. We need a real plan, real action that will defend our economy and our security, and most of all, to put Canada first.
I spoke with Donald Trump yesterday evening, talked about how important it was for us to work together to solve some of the challenges we're facing as a continent, as countries, but also work to grow our economy, protect our workers on both sides of the border. This is the responsible, methodical approach we're taking as we move forward, while our opponent falls back on slogans and fear.
He spoke with the incoming president, and moments later, Mr. Trump put out a tweet slapping a 25% tariff on Canada. So that worked about as well as the Prime Minister's efforts on Buy America and softwood lumber, which continue to be penalized, even though the previous Conservative government got both of those things lifted. Now move over to drugs. The Prime Minister's disastrous legalization and liberalization of drugs has the Americans worried, in addition to costing 47,000 deaths in Canada. Where's the plan to stop the drugs and keep our border open to trade?
Once again, the leader of the opposition is just making stuff up. I clearly spoke with the President of the United States an hour and a half after he put out his suggestion on tariffs. The reality is we're going to continue to work constructively with the incoming administration to protect Canadian jobs, to protect Canadian growth, to take the responsible approach that isn't steeped in partisanship, that pulls together the Team Canada approach that stands up for Canadians instead of throwing our arms up and saying all is broken like the leader of the opposition.
Well, that's even worse. The statement went out promising tariffs before they even got a chance to speak. It's kind of like him backing down on Buy America and backing down on softwood lumber, Mr. Speaker.
Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz, who joins us this morning from Houston. Senator, it's good to see you. Good morning to you. Let's pick up this thread on tariffs. I remember covering your presidential campaign in 2016, and you were a skeptic of tariffs then. I know the politics around tariffs have changed. President-elect Trump has done that. But have the economics changed?
Well, I'll tell you what hasn't changed is the importance of leverage. And I got to say, you look at the threat of tariffs against Mexico and Canada immediately has produced action. We've seen the president of Mexico stand up and promise that she is going to work hand in hand with the president of the United States, President Trump, to secure the border. I'll tell you, representing Texas, we've seen 4 years of an invasion at our southern border. And let me ask you, Major, why hasn't Joe Biden done this? Why hasn't Joe Biden actually stood up and used leverage to secure the border? And the reason is Joe Biden and the Democrats wanted this invasion to happen. And I got to say, this is a promise that I believe President Trump is going to deliver on, and deliver quickly. We are going to secure the border. This is about using leverage to get Mexico and Canada to cooperate. And I'll tell you, Major, I think one of the very first bills we're going to take up in the Senate, vote on, and I hope pass, is my legislation, the Justice for Jocelyn Act, that is a response to the horrific rape and murder of Jocelyn Nungary, 12-year-old girl in Houston, Texas, killed by violent criminal illegal aliens released by Joe Biden and the Democrats. This is a promise the president needs to deliver on. I think he's going to.
So when you think about tariffs and President-elect Trump, you don't take them seriously as an economic matter. You take them seriously only as a diplomatic lever.
Well, look, I think the president was explicit with Mexico and Canada. He said he will impose these tariffs unless they secure the border. It was explicitly leverage. And by the way, that is the same way that President Trump negotiated the Remain in Mexico agreement. If you remember, during his first term, President Trump threatened tariffs against Mexico, and AMLO, then the president of Mexico, he was incredibly scared and concerned. He was scared of Trump, and he ended up signing the Remain in Mexico agreement, which produced the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. It was incredibly successful. What did Joe Biden and the Democrats do when they came in? The very first week in office, they ripped up that incredibly successful international agreement. I expect we will once again enter into Remain in Mexico, and we are going to see, I'm going to make a prediction right now, we will see the numbers plummet of illegal immigration coming into this country, not in a year, not in 6 months, but in January and February, because we will have a president who will vigorously enforce the law.
On that point, Senator Cruz, you would concede that in the last 3 or 4 months, numbers have gone down already, have they not?
They have ticked down slightly. We have still seen over these 4 years the highest rate of illegal immigration in our nation's history. 12 million illegal immigrants have come into this country. And I got to say, in a state like Texas, you want to see the consequences. This last election was an incredible landslide for President Trump. He won all 7 of the swing states. And in Texas, President Trump won Hispanic voters in Texas. I won Hispanic voters in Texas. I won statewide by 1 million votes, 9 points. And South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, has literally spent over 100 years as a bright blue Democrat bastion. This cycle, South Texas flipped Republican, and it is amazing what having 12 million people invade your home can do to change people's voting behavior. I think the president has a mandate to deliver on securing the border, and I look forward to working hand in hand with him to deliver on that promise.